Hi, everybody. Will here with part two of Sam Houston McDonald. And you're not going to want to miss it. He talks about Eagle Farm, Sam Ewing, the Wolfhounds. It's a must listen to. Enjoy yourselves. Hi, everybody. We're back again with the interview chair. Because we had such a great time with Sam last time, I made Sam come back for part two so we can get all the scoop on what he knows. Hi, Sam. How are you?
Good, Will. How are you? Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you again. Well, let's start off. I think our last interview we hadn't touched on Oriental Jade. We maybe had mentioned her name, but I wanted you to talk to me about Oriental Jade.
Where she came from and where she started. And
well, first of all, just imagine that all these people talking don't know who Oriental Jade is, so you better introduce her.
Okay. Well, Champion Oriental Jade was a bitch who was bred by Myra Harris in New Orleans. And she was sold as a puppy and went to Sue Kilby. And Sue showed her and had her and was very successful with her. But Jade came from the breeding that I talked a little bit about earlier on, and that was McCammon Marquis bred to Rossell's Brodie Rose. And it produced this absolutely wonderful, successful litter, all with different kennel names for the most part. 2 Glendees, a Rossell, and a Charlton. And so Jade was Charlton's Oriental Jade. So
now, you don't hear that. You don't hear that often, where a litter has 3 different prefixes.
Not. Sometimes, once in a while, you'll see whether one of them might, in a co-breeder situation, might stick one of their, have a name on their one dog. But in this case, I think Myra was, and Thorne was always a part of the decision making, although it was really Myra's final decision. But I think she left that open in this litter and was very happy. Of course, Charlton would win Yarland and Rossell's California Way, and then her own Glendee's Stonecutter, and 2 boys, Glendee's Stonecutter and Diamond in the Rough, Glendee's Diamond in the Rough, which I later bred to. So the first time I saw Jade was, I told a little bit of story about how I got on the board by parking cars at the National in Danvers, Massachusetts, many, many, many years ago. And then I'd taken a young dog and showed there and everything else. And then I got to start watching some of it. And of course, the last day I got to watch the breed. And there was Jade in the ring. I didn't really know who she was at the time, although Myra had spoken to me about this litter back when they were puppies. And I had said that I couldn't take on anything else, that I had as many dogs as I could living in the city and also other responsibilities. And so, but I had no idea. And Myra told me later this was Jade. But wow. So goes the history. And so at least as far as I'm concerned, I had my hands on her many times and got to see her. So when I saw her in the ring, and as things were narrow, but I saw her from the very beginning as the bitches came in, and I couldn't take my eyes off of her. And as I looked at her, and you have to know back then, that my knowledge of the breed, of the structure, of everything about it, except, ooh, I like that. I couldn't at that time necessarily speak to form and function or to how she's built, but my eye told me at that time, oh my gosh, this is an absolutely beautiful bitch, well balanced, carried herself so beautifully in the ring. I always kind of felt like, how can she be denied? And I get that. We all have our opinions as judges, and I learned that. But at the time, but the day I saw her, and as the competition went on and it got narrowed, I certainly thought that she had a great shot at going breed. That day, Celeste won, showing Shawnee's Pipe Dream Charlton, which was a very, very nice dog also.
Yeah.
I probably learned something there. You know, we all have our reasons as judges for why we've selected something on the day. And when you got down back then, and even true today, because you've done our national certainly not too long ago, as I did, and you get down and you have a number of dogs and bitches that could possibly be your winner of the day, and they're all lovely examples of it. But for me, in my mind and in my heart, and Jade used to hang around. We used to have big hospitality things, and it'd be in some suite in the hotel and everything else. And Susie always just kind of brought Jade along with her, and Jade just kind of was loose in the hospitality room and walking around, and some people were giving her a little cheese and a little snacks and all this stuff. But you really got to spend time with her, and you really got to touch her. That was the nice thing about it, because many times, you know, you see these dogs, but you've never had these Irish setters, I should say, because when I say dogs, I mean dogs and bitches. But when you see them, you don't always have the chance to put your hands on them. But anyway, for me, and there have been several other bitches that I have admired greatly also. And one of them I gave the national to. But for me, Jade, and as I look back, I'm sorry to say, and Maureen Day, who is our historian and stuff, we've pulled up some pictures. The best picture of Jade happens to be the one with all the flowers, because they had it like Run for the Roses type thing, and it was all over. So it you couldn't see the whole picture of her, the whole outline and stuff. But even in that, an absolutely beautiful, well put together angles, and everything fit. Her head fit with her neck fit with her body, tail carriage was good. I just will always remember that picture of her going around the ring in Danvers, Mass. Yeah. So that was Jade, and I warms my heart to think about her. But there were others along the way.
But again, like I grew up with Irish setters as well, and sure. Jade is like Marquis to me was one of the first Irish setter dogs. There was other ones obviously, but he was his type was so extreme that it just caught my eye completely and filled my eye completely. That anything he stamped. So when he sired Jade, I was like, oh my God, look how beautiful she is. You know, it's just
and this amazing. Was the case too. And you know, those four dogs and bitches did not look alike. You know, some of them looked a little more alike than the others did. You know, you could tell kind of they were litter mates possibly, and other, you know. So I think Stonecutter was a different style dog. When you think about Jade and Stonecutter, they were most definitely different styles. They were both had many, many wonderful traits, but they were both different styles, as was Diamond in the Rough, who never really got to be seen much because of the tragedy for him. You know, I don't know if you know about Diamond, but Diamond Diamond in the Rough, I bred to him as a young dog. I told the story in the last session that George said he just wasn't right for my bitch. And then I spoke to Myra, and she was telling me about that she thought maybe Diamond might be good for her, and I bred. And Diamond did sire one other litter with a singleton puppy with a local veterinarian down there. But anyway, Diamond was prepped and ready to go to be a special and to be a big winning special. And they felt very strongly about it. And so did Janie and Bob, who got him. And I don't think I'm telling tales now because I know it. The dog was shipped to Janie and Bob, and they were away, and the client and the help there, the kennel help and stuff, picked him up and took him and everything else. And he ended up having testicle torsion and one of the testicles swelled up real big, ended up while he was there having to be neutered. It was the last dog that Mrs. Cheever Porter, we all know her name, was going to be the last Irish setter that she backed. So in a sense, that was kind of sad, but for me, I was thrilled that I had this litter from him. And I think 4 of them finished out of the litter, and I was very thrilled about it and gave us stuff to carry on. But anyway, Diamond ended up, not only because I bred to him, but Diamond ended up, as I saw them, a little more mature. Of the 2 dogs, I preferred his style. But Rossell's Rosalie, I mean, you think out with Rebecca, against Rebecca, the 2 of them. I had my Lori out at the same time. We couldn't keep up with them. Poor Jeanette was running around everywhere with her. Paul was running her back and forth to the airport there in Colorado. We'd go somewhere and win a group. And the same day, those 2 girls, one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, they'd win groups, and they got twice as many points as we got in the center of the country. So we would go, woo, we won the group. And then all of a sudden we check the results and go, oh. So we were in a position to have to win 2 groups every time they won one group. But anyway, those 3 girls ended up 1, 2, and 3 in the year, which is kind of nice.
Wow, that is amazing.
So, and I felt like my Lori was in very good company coming in 3rd. How's that? You don't hear that often, but I was thrilled and very proud of her. Jeanette did a beautiful job with her. Jeanette, I've always loved to watch Jeanette just set up a dog. You know, it's just kind of a flowing motion, nice and easy, relaxed and stuff. And before you know it, you're thinking that. And then when she gets it all put together, it's a symphony, you know? And then there goes the cymbals, and you go, wow. Anyway,
nice way to put it.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a wonderful litter. Jade, by far my favorite of all 4 of them. You know, but there's been a few other bitches, and I won't start naming, because if I name too many of them, I will say Jade's my favorite. So I always loved the pictures of Durhare and Marietta. So I never saw her in person, but the pictures of her were absolutely beautiful. That was another bitch that was quite lovely. And you know, along the way, we've had, whether they won the national or they were opposite or whatever, we've had some very beautiful bitches. And thank goodness, because I think we all know that's where the heart is. So that's where you go forward. So,
well, I'm in agreement with you. Jade was my favorite as well. So
I'm glad to with you. I'm glad to hear that. So isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? Nice for me, I think, Will. As a compliment. So I wanted to tell you one other thing. I talked a little bit about my Logan, Triskelion Irish Destiny, that was out in like 2005 or something.
Yeah.
And it happened to be Diana Wilson's first special as a handler on her own. And I didn't know Diana. And a lady named Debbie Contardi who had co-bred the litter with that Logan came from. And Logan actually was sold to a companion home. Sadly, the woman developed cancer and had to give Logan back to Jeanette. And so we got him. And finally, when he was a special and everything else, we found that right niche, the right place. Diana took off with him. And that year he ended up being the number 1 Irish setter and all-breed and number 8 sporting dog. So we were happy for that.
Yeah.
So, and that was the time.
I remember Logan because I was showing Piper at the same time in Canada. So I remember Logan.
Right. He was a beautifully put together dog. Beautiful. And he threw himself and stuff. And he threw a number of winners bitch at the national. I think winners bitch at the national under our friend Wayne Cavanaugh, if I remember right. So, yeah, he had sired his winner's bitch. But anyway, Logan, I have one funny story, I think, to tell you. And that is, I was, as you know, Will, I've been busy ever since Danvers, Massachusetts. And then I came on the board. I've never stopped. And I've tried to dedicate my life to our setters, to the education, to the breeding, to anything I could do. The parent club, I served on the board 25 years, and now I'm chairman of the foundation, which I'm very proud of. Fortunately, we're doing great things with our foundation and able to, thanks to many wonderful bequests from people, but we're able to do and working with the Canine Health Foundation have really been able to provide funds for many of these grants, as well as supporting other things. We support junior scholarships. We do a number of things, rescue, that kind of thing. So, but anyway, I just got off track. What was I talking about?
Logan.
Logan, how can I forget my own dog? But anyway, so Logan. So the story about Logan is that I was very busy at the National. It was one of the Pennsylvania Nationals. I was extremely busy. Jeanette was coming over with several dogs, and she said, listen, I can't bring all the dogs with me on the plane because there's always already a spot reserved. Can I ship him to you and you pick him up at the airport and then just keep him for a couple of days till I get there? And I kind of rolled my eyes. She couldn't see that because we were on the phone, but I kind of rolled my eyes and I thought, I've got so much to do to try to get ready. And I'm so involved in still, all this stuff. And I said, Jeanette, yeah, for you, yes, anything for you. Send Logan. So I had Logan's litter mate, Destiny, Triskelion Irish Destiny, who I had finished her quite young. And I had her. And so anyway, so now she was sending Logan. So this dog arrived. I didn't remember his name. He arrived. I was living in Pennsylvania on the farm then with Sam Ewing. I picked the dog up at the airport. I was so busy, I came back. Harvey, our kennel manager, I said, Harvey, the dog's staying up at the house, but just be sure you take care of him, get him done. I showed him everything to do. And I said, I've got so busy. I'm running back and forth between Lancaster and back to the farm and carrying stuff and doing stuff. I said, I just don't have time. So anyway, I totally really forgot. I did think I asked. And then Jeanette arrived. She got this dog and I was gone that day. And she went down and groomed him down at the barn and stuff. And then she went on her merry way with the other people and took the dogs. And this dog was gone, who at that time I didn't know his name. So a few days later, it was Dog Day, and Lita Graham was, Lita from the Northwest, and Lita was doing dogs that year. And so we were watching the different classes. Dear friends of mine, Larry and Paula Larkin, who live here in Texas locally. We've been friends probably 45 years now.
Wow.
Bred dogs together, owned dogs together. Larry was on the board for our setter board for a period of time. Show chairman one time for a national. But anyway, Larry and I were hanging out as we always did, and we would watch dogs as much as we could and do this, and we were doing things. And So anyway, we went over to the ring, and Jeanette, because we saw Jeanette walking over, and so anyway, she had this dog in the ring, and it was a large American bred class, and the dog won the class. And Larry and I were going, oh my gosh, we were just going on and on quietly, but talking about, oh my God, don't you love the way he moved? Don't you love this? I like look how he's feeling, all this. We were talking about all these positives about this dog. And of course, me, like I want that dog. So anyway, she came out of the ring with the dog, with her blue ribbon in her hand, and came over. And Larry and I went rushing over to her. And she was like, what? We were going so fast. I went over there and I said, Jeanette, who is this dog? I want this dog. And she goes, what are you talking about? And she starts laughing. I said, no, what's his name and who is he? She said, it's Logan. I said, who in the hell is Logan? She starts laughing. She said, are you serious? I go, yes, who in the hell is Logan? She said, it's the dog you picked up at the airport and took to your house. I cracked up. Larry cracked up. I had been so busy, I didn't realize. I said, it doesn't matter. I still want this dog. She had the lead in her hand. She hands it over to me like that. And she says, he's all yours. And that's how I got Logan.
Wow.
And what was wonderful about it, so sorry for the lady, but he had come back, and here he had been placed in a wonderful companion home. I understand, but the lady just couldn't take care of him anymore. So we went back to Jeanette, and I was so fortunate, and Larry co-owned him with me, Larry and Paula, and he was just a wonderful dog. His entire life, so easy to live with, such a laid-back dog, and just wonderful, and just your pal.
Yeah.
He really was. So, but that's how I ended up with him.
That's a good story. I'm glad you shared that one.
Thanks. So anyway, I'm looking, we need some time for Irish Wolfhounds.
We do. We got to get the Irish Wolfhounds too.
So
Tell
I
me
could talk
how
about
that all
Irish
came about. What year and what Wolfhounds?
So in 1998, really 1997. Anyway, I met Sam Ewing, and I met him at a dog show somewhere through Mary Beth O'Neill. And then I got an invitation to judge in Charlottesville, Virginia. And Sam Ewing came down there. And then I got an invitation to judge at Bryn Mawr in Pennsylvania. And I went up there, and this started Sam's and my relationship about, especially about the dogs. We were, yes. And Sam was a great man in my book. He was a great dog person, and he was a very good person. He wasn't always a great lawyer, but he did so many other things. He was too busy being a lawyer. He was a lawyer, but he was too busy being a dog person. But anyway, so he said, you got to move up here. I want you to help me with the dogs and everything else. And so it ended up, I did move up. And then we went off the very first year to Lake Placid to the National. And Sam, for whatever reason, did not enter, but he had a board meeting and we went. And I will just throw this in. When I arrived at the farm, I had visited there, but when I arrived at the farm, there were 100. Now you have to understand, this farm was a family farm owned by Sam's father and mother. And then after his father passed away, his mother owned it. They never lived on the farm. They had their horses there, and that's where they had the hunts, and there was a huntsman. But then Sam moved into that house. I think the first room was little room where the fireplace was 1703, if I remember right. But anyway, and then it was added on to and became quite a large house. But Sam had 118 wolfhounds in the paddocks. And this goes back to one of the old kennels. Now, we had 4 people working pretty much full time with these dogs. And Sam was always up in there. And Harvey Steyer was his name. He died about a year after Sam died. And it was almost as devastating for me that when Sam passed as when Harvey passed. And Harvey was really the knowledgeable, wonderful man. I did grow to know all 118 names of those dogs. And I'll get to that in a minute. But we moved there. We went up. Sam, the very first national, had me go down and look. He was busy visiting and stuff. I think he was trying to get rid of me so he could talk to this person about something that had to do with the board or whatever. And so I walked off and went down and was watching. And I really didn't know much about the breed at all. And we really hadn't discussed him at all. So, I mean, we talked about him. We'd been up in the paddocks with them. It was absolutely wonderful. You figure they had 600. This farm, the part of the farm that was left was 600 acres with 4 farmhouses and barns on them in different spots. And the one that we lived in, and we had huge paddocks. There had been the original kennel for the foxhounds up there, Penn Marydale. His father was part of the start of Penn Marydale foxhounds, and that's where the Penn Marydales were. So part of them anyway. And so Sam converted it and stuff and used it. And it was wonderful, the wolfhounds. You know, that's the neat thing kind of about that breed. You don't have to have, we didn't have runs. We just had kennel buildings and kennel areas. And you had a confining pen that was, some people would like to have a backyard that big, you know, but we had these confining pens for the wolfhounds and stuff, and separation and who got long and heat pins and all of that stuff. I mean, it was all worked like clockwork. And you had all the people, and they checked the bitches every day for when they were coming in, if they were coming into season. And when they tested red, off they went to the heat pins. But it was so educational to me going back to the national that I went down. Sam came down. I told him the bitches that I liked. There were bitches in the ring. And he said, "You've done a very good job. You have picked everything that is not correct in the breed." And I go, "Really?" I said, he said, "Well, maybe they moved around fine around the ring." But that's when he began to teach me shape and make, you know, of these hounds, of these Irish wolfhounds, how they should be built, why they should be built that way. And once again, as in other breeds, different styles. They're still all correct, but you still got to have that correct outline. And I think that's probably true of any breed. Any breed, they have to have that correct outline.
No question.
So anyway, that was kind of the start of there at Eagle Farms. But I am a hero. Spoke of Harvey Steyer, the kennel manager. I am a hero, and I always was a hero in Harvey's eyes. So there were, of course, ticks are very prevalent in Pennsylvania, and Lyme's disease is very prevalent. And Harvey and his wife, Barb, and others that worked there were constantly bathing. We had gallons of flea and tick shampoo, and they were constantly, to keep up with 118, bathe these dogs and bitches so that they wouldn't. And so Sam was talking about, I told him about, you know, well, there's this stuff that's come out that you can put between their shoulder blades and their hip blades, and it'll keep the fleas and ticks away. And he says, "Oh, that stuff has got to be more expensive and stuff." And I said, "Probably more than the shampoo. I don't know how much." So he said, "Well, I don't think I want to do it." So anyway, I went down and talked to Harvey. And I said, "Harvey, I want to know how much you spend a month on shampoo and how many hours you guys spend bathing these dogs." Got the information. I won't go through the details. Went back to Sam, and Sam said, "Fine, order it." So I ordered it. And from then on, they received once a month. And Harvey said to me after it started, Harvey wasn't sure it would work, but after about the first 30 days and checking the dogs, they checked the dogs every day. Feeding time was the perfect time to do that. And while they were being fed in groups of 10, they would check the dogs over, check the bitches for being in season, make sure they didn't have any wounds on them, whatever. And then they'd check their skin out and everything else and make sure they didn't have fleas or ticks. It was wonderful. It was a great process they used. But anyway, I remember the day Harvey and I was up there because I used to go up and help. And he said, and he had this real gruff voice, Sam, I think you're my hero. And I said, for what? And so then we went through it. So that kind of happened. But what a great experience. I mean, there are certainly people who don't believe in having kennels like that. I happen to not be one of those people. I think if you can, certainly you have to have the money to do it. Mm-hmm. But if you can, and people who could, and you think about years ago, people in our breed had at least, Ted kept about 50, I think.
Yeah.
And so Lucy Jane, I'm not even sure what Lucy Jane kept. I know she kept a number of dogs. I'm not sure how many she had. And Joyce, we know, had probably as many setters as Sam had wolfhounds anyway, at times. And she had several places that she kept hers, whether those closer to the house and then the other kennel that was a little further away.
Just think of all the great dogs we would have missed if we didn't have these kennels, though.
And I think there is something to be said when you're talking about genetics here, and that, the cream always rises to the top. The problem is you have to have enough of the raw milk to get that cream. And I think in this sense, that's why some of our great dogs came from those situations where people who did more breeding produced, not all of their dogs were, nobody's are, but produced and was able to produce those. Pardon me. So anyway, there were many things that I'll go on about Sam Ewing for a minute, if that's okay with you.
Yes, of course. I want to.
He had an extensive library that was in many rooms of the house and bookshelves covered. And he was an avid reader. He was well-traveled. He bought antique books from all over the place. Fortunately, I have a number of them that I have kept, and I reference them, and I find them to be supportive. These books that were written in the mid to late 1800s are very supportive of what we still see in the ring today. And if you read those books and you read what they say and in their descriptions, maybe they don't use the same lingo as we do, but the reference to what it is and what they're talking about is there. So I've been fortunate. As I said before, I was not an avid reader about novels and stuff. I wish I had been. I had a brother that was, but I certainly could never put dog books down. I read them, stayed up late and read them and studied them and learned from so many people, and all those breed books that have been put out about different breeds. Sam had many of them. Certainly, as I was increasing the number of breeds that I could judge, I read some of them also and were very helpful. And of course, I got the herding group. The second group I got was herding. And of course, a lot of those dogs had been back in the working group. So back at the time, I certainly remember as you probably do too, when that split.
Oh, yeah.
So into the two groups. But
1985,
Sam,
I think.
right. Sam is a world of knowledge. And when he sat down and talked to you, now he was a fierce competitor. When he was in the ring, let me put it that way, because you never beat him. And somebody like myself who had another eagle dog, Eagle Irish Wolfhound, in the ring against him, you better not beat him. And every time it happened, especially with a big special, which I did on 3 different occasions, he didn't speak to me for a week. He had to take it out on somebody, so he had to take it out on me. But I beat him one time with an absolutely beautiful bitch. Absolutely beautiful bitch. She knew she should have won. I did everything but beg the judge, please don't put her up. Please don't put her up, you know. I wouldn't look at the judge. I was looking down. I was ignoring. I thought, do not point to me. But I could tell that the judge loved the first time it happened. I got my bet. It was a class bitch. I got best of breed, best of winners, and he got opposite sex back there with the special. And he walked out of the ring, and I started to say something to him, and he walked right on past me, went out, let the dog exercise, put him in the van. He's ready to go home. Why in the world should we stay for the group? So I always had to convince him, oh, come on, stay, show her, you'll be fine. So he was just that way. So he was a fierce competitor. He was never ugly to other people, but one of his own beat him like that, and he wasn't happy. So
That's hilarious.
On the other hand, he was a very kind gentleman, and he was a gentleman, and he shared his knowledge and was willing to share his knowledge with anyone who would truly listen and try to learn. And it was great. We drove a lot with the dogs, sometimes 5 dogs in the back of the minivan, but we would drive to dog shows and stuff. And I drove most of the time. And because when he drove, he read the newspaper while he was driving. So I preferred to drive. So the steering wheels used to be black from the print because he read the newspapers all the time. So I chose to drive. But we'd drive 10 or 12 hours, in a day or something to get to dog shows. And that was a great time to, between his naps, to bend his ear and talk to him. But when Sam would do a presentation, I remember I was still in Texas, and the Dallas Fort Worth Judges group that I started with Joe Perkaiser and Pat Gellerman and a few others. We had Sam. They were going to do Wolfhounds, but they said no way, and no one knew that about Sam and myself. And so they said, "Oh gosh, it'd be great if we could get Sam Ewing down here to talk about Wolfhounds," but that could never happen. And I didn't say a word, and so I called Sam, and he said, "Sure, I'll come down there." So, are there dog shows? And I said, "Yes, there are." He said, "Well, I'll go by way of Florida and show first, Pennsylvania to Florida, and then I'll come over to Texas." So he came over and he did the presentation. It was the first time I'd ever seen him speak, and he was unbelievable, Will. He had all of these legal sheets, the yellow sheets, with notes on them. And I mean, it would be a rolled over stack, this huge, that he carried with him. He would walk and he'd sit up on the table, and he'd have that stack down there, and he never picked it up. And he began to talk, and for an hour and a half, actually that day we ran over into 2 hours, he sat and talked about 3. Wasn't a bunch of visuals up behind him, nothing. And in the end, he received a standing ovation. He verbally painted the picture of this breed, what it should look like, what it should move like, so eloquently. It was mesmerizing.
I bet.
Truly mesmerizing. What an educator. What a man. And of course, and being a lawyer, that helped a little bit. And he was used to speaking in public because Sam was basically kind of a shy guy. You know, he wasn't one to carry on a lot of conversation. Once he got to know you, yes. And he loved to help children. Juniors, he loved them, loved to help them and enjoyed them, and loved his nieces and nephews also. Crazy about them and later on their children. He was a true Uncle Sam. So it was great to hear him talk. Something. Right. So just checking here. Okay. So remind me when we started, Will. What time did we start?
It would have been your time. We've been going for about 40 minutes now.
Okay, so we've got about 20 more. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so
unless we do part 3, Sam.
People will get bored with me.
We'll just start a series on Sam.
they'll get bored with me. After this, they'll probably have had enough. I think, I don't know which way you want me to go next. I can talk a little bit about Captain Graham, who is credited with saving the breed in a sense, because, Ireland had these wolves and they needed to get rid of them. And they got this great dog that was produced and they killed the wolves. And I would say most of those they talk about were like, we think about how tall the wolfhounds can be now, 35, 36 inches. But back then they were probably, I think they said like 31 inches, 33 to 33 inches or something. Still giant dogs.
Yeah, formidable.
But we've certainly they've evolved to be even bigger nowadays. But anyway, they were still well-built dogs that could do the trick to kill the wolves. And so,
explain, if you will, I want you to explain the shape of the wolfhound for me, for our viewers, because it is a really misunderstood shape to a lot of people's eye.
Right. So I'm going to give you, this is Sam Ewing's take on it, because this is what he taught me. And he said the first thing that you want to do, and you've heard this before, is take an S. Think of the letter S and stretch it out. And then you're going to lift up the one part, if you can see, to make the head, and come down and come off the neck, over the shoulders, down, over the loin, around the croup, and down. So in a sense, this is the top part that you're seeing. But you're going to have that same shape, this stretched out S, back underneath, because you're going to have both that flow. And they give you these beautiful curves, not angles. Because although you might hear nowadays more so people are talking angles, wolfhounds are about curves. Yes, do they have an angle? Do they have an angle like another dog? But it's the curve of the whole dog and how it's made. The beautiful shoulder layback, the smoothness, that long neck, that long head, really, everything, but yet it's all balanced and makes that beautiful. And you wanted that bone on them, and you wanted that rough coat on them. And you wanted them what was called and is called a greyhound-like shape. Doesn't say they're greyhound shaped, they're greyhound-like. And what I was taught from Sam is you can certainly, when you have a rough coat, that can disguise, that's why you got to touch them. So when you came from the top of the head and you went down and you came the neck and the arch and into the shoulder laid back, and you went back and over and got to it, not in the middle of the back. It didn't start there. You came across the back, and then as you started to go over the loin, there was a rise. It wasn't a big rise like you might see more so on a greyhound, but there was a rise, and a definite rise. It wasn't just a slight little thing. There was a definite, and that gave you that stretched out S shape. Does that help at all?
Oh, for sure. I can see it.
And you can see, and the important, what people miss, the top line and the underline go together. And the bone and the substance of these dogs and the thighs on them. And as Sam told me, you always want a fat butt on them. When you go around to look at the back and you feel down its croup and how smooth it is down in this long tail, that should all be, and when you feel behind, there should be substance and width. And when you feel on top, you should be feeling those hip bones that are sitting well apart and the strength. And if you ever see them work, I don't know if I should tell this gruesome story or not. Can I tell a little?
We're all dog people. Go ahead.
Okay. So Harvey and his wife, Barb, lived in another house on the property. Sam went away. I had something and I couldn't leave. Sam went away to to dog shows, and I was there at the house basically by myself. I had my call to glory. My Lori was still alive, and she was there with me. Only one drove Sam crazy. She was too busy for him. This is too busy for me. Our setters were too busy. So anyway, I was there and I was sitting up. We had a kind of a split kind of thing on the house, but I was upstairs. The dog run started, or the big paddock went up the hill. And I'm sitting there and I was able to see way over, a long way away. I would say at least, let's say it was across was almost a football field. Okay. I'm looking at the kennel building and I can see these 4 girls just hanging out there, and there were a couple of dogs. And all of a sudden, along the fence line, I see a deer pop over. And I see the dogs turn and look ever so slowly. No quick movement, no nothing. Obviously, they knew what they were doing, and I figure later on they knew they had done it before. But anyway, I was watching them the whole time, and I was just mesmerized. I thought, should I yell out so that, this deer takes off? And I couldn't help it, but I kept watching. And ever so slowly, this deer was grazing, was by itself, working its way into the middle, more into the middle of the paddock. Yes, you know where I'm going with this. Anyway, this deer got about halfway across that paddock towards them. The dogs never moved. The bitches, it's almost like without looking at each other, were communicating. And as it got about halfway, those bitches popped up. They were laying in the shade of the building, popped up, took off. And so you figure the deer had half the paddock to go to safety to jump over the fence. In half of that half, 2 of those bitches took that deer down. I then got to see how, because of how they're built, is how they can function. And that gait and that suspended gait as they open up and close, front and in, and how far they're reaching out. This was not a trot. And it shocked me. The next thing shocked me a little bit too, because they started getting into a fight over the deer, and I started yelling at them and stuff. And I had to take, they were trained on rakes. And I know that sounds funny, not to be used on them. We didn't ever hit any of it. They were metal rakes, and when you banged them on the ground, they made noise. And from the time they were puppies, that's how Harvey kind of trained them. So if you're herding these puppies to a pen in the barn where they were as they were growing up, and they had in and out runs, he had tapped them to get them back in there. It was just fascinating.
I bet.
So they had all these ways to do it. But when you're talking about those numbers, of course, they had to But anyway, the dogs took the deer down. Anyway, but I got to see the function of those. I want to touch on one other thing. Any more about the shape? You want me to talk any more about?
You visualize that very well for me.
Because the ears, they can read about that. Rose ears, why they wanted small ears. So if they got in and were killing the wolves, they were less able to grab a hold of them. Very, very reasonable. I mean, everything was for a purpose. I will say that learning about the wolfhounds and the breeding programs and stuff, when I first came there, and I said this to Sam, this breed is a heartbreaking breed. And if you're not a tough cookie, it's best, although it is improved, it's best not to get into it because this is not a long-lived breed for the most part. They have improved, which I'm thrilled about. And I'm proud to say that Sam Ewing did everything he could, and he traveled over and met people in Europe and worked with several kennels. Fionn May, Josie Cornelise was one. Pitt Lockery was another Irish Wolfhound kennel. Müller in Germany, which was Poppenfuss and Jürgen Rosner and Jürgen Poppenfuss. And I do think Rosner is still alive, but I know that Jürgen Poppenfuss has passed away a number of years ago. And they were landscaping architects and did all this stuff. And in fact, they did something I recently thought of them because I believe they had a project on one of Tina Turner's houses in Switzerland. So anyway, they had Sam worked with all of these. He brought his goal was always, because small gene pool, they had been saved by Captain Graham. I think people can read about that. Captain Graham is really given credit for saving the breed when they got down after there were no more wolves and got down. Gene pool got even smaller. He was the one that really, and deerhounds were part of this. The larger deerhounds were part of saving the breed and through generations of breeding and got it back to where it is today. But these breeders that he worked with and others, he was trying to improve the health, but also the longevity of the breed. And when I came to the farm, we were still losing a number of them at, I would say, 6 to 7 years of age. And Sam worked very hard on that and with others and brought in some wonderful dogs. Maximilian Fionn May was a young dog that he brought in. And in fact, at Morrison Essex, he took the breed over all the specials at one of the Morrison Essex and went on. He could only stay here. The agreement and the contract with Josie Cornelise said he would stay here for about 12 months, and he ended up staying about 18 in the States. And Sam went over and tried to convince her to sell the dog. We were so attached to him. Max was a wonderful dog and a great producer. And Sam worked so very hard to try to keep the dog, but he also kept his word. And so Max had to go home. And there were others, but they went back and forth. And it's not that those people didn't get dogs from Sam and vice versa. It went back and forth. And Sam used to send people over so that they could go and he'd pay their way over to bring certain dogs back. All they had to do is fly over to wherever it was in Europe and then fly back. And brought dogs in and tried to. And I would say by the end, the last 2 wolfhounds that I had, and I will talk about one dog after Sam passed away, but the last 2 dogs that I had that I brought from Pennsylvania to Texas, both lived to be over 10 years of age.
Oh, wow.
So, and there were more that we hear about that are 9 and late into their 8th year and stuff. So his goal was achieved. Is it long enough? No. But as you know, in Great Danes and other giant breeds, the longevity is not there for the most part.
Right.
There's always exceptions, but in general, life expectancy is not so great. But anyway, I wanted to, I don't know, how much time are we now? 10 minutes?
Yeah. Don't worry about it. Keep going.
Well, okay. So anyway, the thing that I am proud of, and I certainly did it for Sam, it was when Sam became ill and was going in and out of the hospital and knew that time was getting shorter for him. He came to me. We had about, I want to say maybe 50 hounds by then. And because he knew he had not been feeling as well, was not showing, and as time went, and we were decreasing. We weren't doing the number of litters that we had done, a number of things. And he personally needed attention also. And I turned to certainly help him with that. So health-wise. So anyway, we had maybe, let's say 50 dogs. It doesn't matter, but close to that. About half of what we did. And Sam called me into his bedroom one day and he said, listen, I want Eagle, and we were there on Eagle Farms. He said, I want Eagle to die here. And I said, what? And he said, I want Eagle to die here. He said, when I pass away, I want these dogs to stay here, or they're going to have to be spayed or neutered if they're placed. And I don't want any of them bred. And this is it for Eagle. And I said, oh, Sam, really? I'm looking at it like this is your life's work, that you've worked so hard with this breed and improved the looks of them and done so many things. And so I was disappointed, but I was certainly respectful of what his wishes were. So anyway, we went on a couple more months and everything else. And all of a sudden, this is actually kind of funny to me anyway. He had a turn for the worse at one point, and he did get better after, but he had a turn for the worst. He had to go into the hospital. Even the family was alerted and told to come in because he had, there were 5 of them. He had three brothers, and one sister. We called her Sister Ann. But anyway, she had 4 children or whatever. But anyway, we called in the family because he was not doing well. And so he made it and got better. They ended up not all having to come. And so we're sitting there. I'm sitting by the bedside and we're just talking. The TV was on and everything else. He was waiting for a doctor to come in. And so he kind of looks over at me and he says, in just very short, said, oh, by the way, remember what I discussed with you? And I said, I'm thinking we've talked about so much. I said, like what? He said, oh, the thing with the dogs. And I said, yeah. He said, forget what I said. You do what you want to do. So when Sam passed away, kind of an eerie story. He was sick. Mary Summershoe, you knew Mary, baseball cap Mary, showed Great Danes.
Yeah.
Showed my tip.
Baseball cap Mary. Yeah.
Yes. Huh?
Baseball cap Mary, yeah.
Yes, baseball cap Mary. God love her. I miss her. So anyway, we were, Mary was there. Mary was a dear friend of Sam's, became a very close friend of mine. And so we were talking about this, and the day Sam died, he was there at the hospital. His brother, Bill, was there, and there were his niece, Annie, who lived on part of the farm, too, in one of the houses, and with her husband and 2 boys. And she was up there. And anyway, there were a few of us up there. And when Sam passed away and everything else, of course, they had to do all the things afterwards. And we were up there and making arrangements and all that stuff. And his brother was the executor and he was taking care of it. And so finally it was time, and Mary and I were driving back from Philadelphia. He was in Philadelphia, and drive back to the farm, which took us about 45 or 50 minutes maybe, with no traffic. And so as we got there, where you came up on a bluff, and you looked down on the farm, and the driveway for about a quarter of a mile went way down and then came back up and then went up into the area where the barn was and stuff. And then you went past the barn and the blacksmith shop that had been a blacksmith shop at one time. And then there was the house. As we got to the top of the hill, all the dogs were at bay, singing. And I used to love it. You know, if you've ever heard a bunch of wolfhounds go off, it is like singing. It's not barking. It's like they're singing. To me, it is anyway. And they were singing like crazy. We drove down the driveway. Annie's husband, who's the niece next door, her husband, Larry, was in the driveway. All these years. He said Sam had been dead about 2.5 hours. And he said, about 2.5 hours ago, the wolfhounds started doing this, and they haven't stopped. And I mean, what I'm doing now, Mary and I just broke down.
Yeah.
But Sam, not only, it just shows you, Sam, no matter what they say, I know it. He brought most of those puppies into this world. He used to say, he used to breathe into their noses and like breathing life into them, even though they were breathing. But each one of them knew him and identified. And they, no matter what we did about helping to take care of the puppies and all that stuff, they treated him differently. And I truly think in my heart, they knew.
Yeah.
They knew that he was gone. Sorry, Debbie, but that's made me think of that. Sorry. But Larry was like, what in the world? Larry didn't know yet that he had passed away. And I told him how I look at my watch and I say, oh my God, it's about 2.5. He said, oh my gosh, that's when they've started. And they haven't stopped. And they didn't stop until I got out of the car and I went up into the first part of the first paddock and told them it was okay. You know, I told them good dogs and stuff, and they didn't immediately stop, but they began to settle. So, and that same night, his Sam's nephew played the bagpipes. And it may have been the next night. It was the next night. He came down, brought his bagpipes. We didn't know he was going to do it. He walks over from Annie's house. He goes up on the top there and plays his bagpipes. So it was, I'm sharing private moments that most people have never heard. Yeah. Very few knew that. But it was changing. I have to say that one other thing, and I don't like to be negative, but I have to say this breed needs Sam Ewing, and he's not here.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping at some point things will improve. I'll just put it that way. So, but that was basically, I stayed on the farm. I later on decided Dane was this beautiful bitch. I'm sorry, I'm terrible about names, because in Sam, of course, used all these Gaelic names and stuff that I couldn't pronounce very well, even coming from an Irish breed, but couldn't pronounce all these names. And so, but anyway, Dane, this beautiful, beautiful big, powerful bitch. I decided to breed her, and I wasn't sure who to breed to. And Sam dealt he had a close-knit group, and he dealt with a number of people, with the breed. Doug and Amy, Doug Marks and Amy Benjamin, who were married, were like his children. He was very close to them. And there were Art and Linda King, and then there was Libby Bono, and anyway, there was over Puritan. Shirley Farr was her name. She used to run some, and may still, dog shows in Ohio. But anyway, Shirley was close, but she was Puritan Irish Wolfhounds. And I talked to Shirley. This is after Sam died and stuff. And I said, I need to find a dog for Dane. And I want to find something a little bit out. And she told me about this dog. And I'm sorry, it's terrible to say that I can't remember the dog's name at the moment. But anyway, nice dog. She described everything else. Talked to the owners of it. Got the breeding. I had 8 puppies, 7 boys and 1 girl. The girl, as we were growing them up and looking at them, and I have to say, Sam and I always enjoyed grading litters together. And I learned from him. And once I felt like I learned, he always appreciated my opinion, which I felt very proud of, that he really considered my opinion of his breed to when we were grading puppies. So maybe he didn't agree with me as much when I was looking at adults, but with puppies, he liked it. So anyway, I bred this litter, seven boys and a girl. The girl was okay, but there were 7 boys and there were several nice ones in there. And the one I decided on kept having some little something go up and down, and it didn't want to stay down. And in the end, it didn't stay down. And I kept what I considered, who I thought was very nice, but I kept the other boy. I think temperament-wise, I just kind of liked the other one, So this puppy that I got from that litter, I grew up and showed, and we finished. I co-owned them with Joe and Kathy Rowland, which were other people who became very close to me and are still dear friends and have continued to breed some of the Eagle lines. But anyway, we owned, and his name was, my Irish setter kennel name in the end, after I didn't use the Bayberry and used my own, was Marika. And Marika is the bark of the Bayberry bush. And I love the play on the words of bark. So anyway, Marika, and he was Dunn, I put Dunn Fortress in front of it, Dunn Marika, Speaker of Eagle. And we finished him. He won his class, a puppy class, when he was a puppy at the National, and did some well. But as he came out, and Sam held the record, and still does, but in my book, Sam held the record for most best in shows for dogs and bitches. Lee was the bitch's call name. She still holds the record for bitches. But Tip, I showed Tip, and then Joe Rowland, and then Mary Summershoe, baseball cap. We were all 3 involved with Tip, as was Joe's wife, Kathy. But he went on to do well, finished quite properly, had a great specialist career. But he, the year Pat Trotter did the garden, and she placed the Deerhound first of Gail Bontecue's, my Tip, or our Tip, went second in the group. So, and that was quite unusual. If you remember that year, she placed the Deerhound and the Wolfhound, first and second. But anyway, and Tip went on, he had been that number 2 hound over that year, but he went on to accumulate 24 best in shows, which broke the record of Sam's Huey. And I didn't feel bad about it because it was still Sam's. And Sam was actually listed, which you could do. Sam was still listed as the breeder on this bitch. So the mother of Tip. But anyway, he did, and he's the top winning AKC Best in Show dog. So, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
So, and produced very well. Produced some lovely, lovely puppies. Some very correct puppies, well fronted. So anyway, that's kind of some of it. There's so much more, but that's a little bit into Eagle Farms. It was a great place. I loved living up there. The winters got a little rough for me once in a while. I remember a couple of times, almost 4 feet of snow. I wasn't happy about that at all, being a Texan. It was pretty in the beginning, but when you had to dig out, it was like, oh my gosh. So, but I loved it. How are we on time? About it? Yep, we are. We're past.
Yeah, that was great, Sam. I'm
Listen,
so
Will, I hope this is what you were looking for, and
it was great.
I just kind of talked on a lot. I didn't
That's
even
all
get.
I want. That's all I want, and I'm glad we did part 2.
This book about Captain Graham, and I didn't even get to it. So I'll tell you about that some other time.
Right.
It's very good to talk to you, my friend.
Good to see you as well, Sam. That was wonderful. I really appreciate your time.
No problem. No problem. And I wish you well and hope to see you. And we'll be talking.
Oh, for sure. Thank you, Sam. Sam, you outdid yourself. That was unbelievable. I really appreciate your time and listening to your stories. If you like what you see here, make sure you press the like, share, and subscribe button. Don't forget you can find out what's happening. Go to my new website, Will Alexander's Dog Show Tips, and you'll find out what's happening in my world. Do not forget about the podcast every Thursday with Wayne Kavanaugh, the Dog Show Drive. That was great, Sam. Until next time, everybody, take care.